Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode. Today's episode is a very important one for me personally. Today I was capable of solving one of the biggest, I would say puzzles to psychology I've envisioned. And pretty much I realized something today. And both the subtitle and the title can be interchangeable. At the same time, most people who normally tune in, I eventually saw a tutorial on YouTube, and pretty much I set up a noise cancellation thing. So there's a noise suppression filter on the microphone, and it's a windy day right now on my balcony, so hopefully it sounds alright. The chat section is here for the viewers to also be able to share their inner realms with me, so everyone is welcome to communicate. So, to this topic, something happened, guys, today. Where I don't know what it was. Like, I don't know how it happened, but I suddenly had an angle shift in my own perception and in my own view of not my intellect, but just the nature of the intellect. And I managed to put that experience into this sentence: our own suffering can make us forget others or emotional beings. At first I'd written emotional entities, but I thought there could be beings beyond entitlement. That means, an emotional being is not necessarily a human. It doesn't have to necessarily be a human being or any archetype being. It's just the emotions there. It's like emotions are winds that, pass through our soul. That pass through our body like our own soul, let's say. There was this yogi by the name of Kabir. He had this view. Somebody had asked him, it's like, hey man, where do you live? And he said that I live in the body, as if he's this, presence of true being, and it's just like a person's living in a house. It's like the body is the house for, let's say, the unknown witness. There's something happening in life which makes it, in some sense, a multidimensional event, if it can be received. I would say we can have this concept of adding subjective dimensions and finding objective dimensions, right? So anyways, I suddenly came to this conclusion that let's say I'm speaking to people who have somehow been drawn to spiritualism of some kind, metaphysics, or that's the formal term, spiritual, let's say spiritual even from a cultural level. Okay. Pretty much I noticed that when a human being takes their own suffering really seriously, they on some level stop considering the emotional states of that which is outside of them. On some level, every person has the task of piloting their intelligence in this realm, but sometimes we can get so caught up in intellectually piloting it, as if not realizing that the human beings are not just intelligent creatures, they are intelligent in space. And so the nature of the free will is to provide a sort of selection process, The free will sees, or let me say it this way, we are being consciousness. Life is appearing as a changing event. And so where it's changing is in our consciousness, right? So our consciousness is like that space before there's any movement of an individual identity. It's just, or I would say it's our awareness, pretty much. That means before me giving this talk or before the viewers listening, on some existential level, right? Existential and on some instantaneous, let's say, how would I say it? It's like an instantaneous moment where your existence is just being and your experience is noticing it being. And so it's like this effortless awareness to how you're being a conscious entity. I don't know how to say it. It's just pretty much you notice before any effort or movement comes, you're just being here, right? You're being the presence of the moment. Now, being that presence of the moment is kind of like acknowledging the spaciousness of the mind. And so human beings right now in history, for those people who may listen to this, let's say thousands of years in the future, who knows? There's times where I don't know how long my voice echoes, and there's times where I feel, my voice is waiting a bit. What I mean by that is that poetically, the future is also happening now. The intellect is another way of saying how a creature uses memory to solve problems and, in some sense, it's like there's a problem in the moment, and to live as a human being is like the solution to that problem. Now the person's like, okay, am I going to solve this problem based on, the limitations of the past or the limitlessness of the future? One thing I realized, and I'll get to I'm still building up to the sexuality of this episode. Something I realized is that the intellect is using the past as a tool to solve the problems it finds in the present, and is also defining the problem based on the past. That means if somebody wanted to truly be a problem solver, the first time you look at the problem, that's kind of like your memory's opinion. And then the second time you look at the problem, it has to be an approach where you have already seen how your past is bringing meaning into the present, right? So it's as if I say right now it's a happy moment, it's as if or let's say somebody says they're in a sad moment, okay? It's as if that sadness is based on how the past has happened to the present, right? But that means a lot of people, their emotions are coming from their past. When you look at the future and you notice there's still unknown ways to walk in this world, then in some sense, it's as if we give the future a chance to allow our imagination to probabilize how many ways reality can move now. Pretty much the realization I had today was that I felt my soul and my karma was moving through a Raja Yogian rhythm, right? There was a moment, I can tell you, something happened today where I suddenly realized the bigger picture of all the thoughts that have ever existed in the mind of man. That means there is the human being, which starts out as a physical shape. But then, when we really look a bit closer at the human being is not a shape. The human being has access to multiple shapes and is selecting out of it. Free will is in a sort of all you can eat, all you can consume, information buffet, right? it's like the brain has its plate in its hand, and it's like all any sensory information is like what from the buffet it's choosing. Somebody's gonna be like, Mr.Within's hungry. Maybe we should support his podcast, you know. Okay, guys, thanks for letting me know. I turned down the music. I made it halfway. You know, I brought it down like halfway. What I do for the viewers. But anyways, to keep going with this, what I'm trying to say is that sometimes when we look at this world, we see a creature that has opened its eyes and is seeing a lot of emptiness, meaninglessness, nothingness. You know, pretty much chaos is noticeable. So this creature is reacting to this emptiness, and it is under the assumption that it needs to have a sort of intellectual, it's as if reason and rationality is being the first counterattack of mankind to a sort of retaliation to the void, to an existential void. It's as if we opened our eyes, we couldn't figure out, we freaked out, and so how we chose to respond to how we freaked out because of all the meaninglessness was, in some sense, we began making ourselves the importance of the cosmic activity. And so what I'm trying to say is that the rationalization of an incredible cosmic multidimensional event is the first approach, but there are other approaches. And what I realized today is that in my calculation of human nature, I was looking at it purely geometrically, but when I realized the emotional, it's not like I'm saying I just realized people are emotional, I'm just saying. What I'm trying to say is I realized that the intellect suffers because it is moving in an incomplete picture. But what completes the picture, it's like, this is what they don't tell you really, that life is a chess game between the self and the world. And there's moments where the self makes chess moves, and then the self waits, and the world makes chess moves, right? So there's some moments where the person learns through a personification lens, or either through their self or others. And then there's a way a person learns, it's as if like their teacher is how their moment is happening. It goes beyond the voice of any man to the direct experience of how our eyes have journeyed so far. You know? So what I'm trying to say is that today a sort of, it was as if something blurry in my approach to the intellect. To me, the intellect is like the ability of human beings to be conscious of a world and then to utilize memory and imagination to function and navigate in it. Pretty much it's as if reason is a synchronization of inner realms with outer realms, pretty much, right? Imagination is when the outer realms are trying to synchronize with the inner realms. You know, it's pretty much like on one level our psychology is starting as a real event and wondering about abstract events. On another level, it's starting as an abstract event and then wondering about reality, right? These are part of the nature of man, like at least as one human being that is observed this plane. through the reaction, pretty much eyes opened, we saw emptiness. Again, we freaked out. And we were like, all right, there's so much unknown around, we're going to believe in our own knowledge. And so there's nothing wrong with that. The species has done this. It's like literally it's like strategy is ultimate survival, and a reason has been our greatest tactic so far, right? So far, at least being introduced to it and everything. But what I realize is that a person can get so, it's literally like from the moment you're born, how much of your attention has been on the self, and how much has the attention been on the species, let's say, and how much has the attention been on the world. I realized my intellect in regards to myself was disconnecting me from trying to consider the emotion of a species. Like, so far I've been giving these Mr.Within talks, you know, I mean, it's pretty much like I've been giving, talking like a designer, you know, I'm pretty much, there's a geometric, you know, subtext to my speech. But I realized that the emotional, like, that means the psychology of not just one person on a planet being divided between how they're being a physical being, how they're being a subjective being, and then how they feel about how their whole world is being. Do you know how the subjective own world, that a subject, the invisible subject that's owning the visible object, feels about how the whole moment is being? You know? Please let me know in the chat section if the audio is better and the sound is, background sound is audible. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is that the intellect has a purpose, has a grand purpose, but when it comes to collective eventhood, right? Like right now, people, every person's like in their own inner universe. They're in their own inner universe, and pretty much everybody starts from their own world, how their brain attempts to replicate the outer realms. Or let me say it this way, everybody starts with an original nature. That means before children are named, technically they are the walking earth, you know. What I'm trying to say is that due to our identification as an individual self, the attention of the human being goes on the individual self, because our own biological existence is more important than our collective experience. We have allowed ourselves as a species to ignore the calling of an advanced civilization. This happens, it's a rare thing when it happens. You know, it's a rare thing when a corner of the universe aims to advance beyond its geometry. You know, I would say, just like how there's a beauty to geometrical shapes, and there's a type of geometrical beauty where you can look at a picture, just like a still picture, and you're like, wow, look at the beautiful lines, the artistry. And then there's a geometrical thing where the geometry is moving, and this can be experienced in the inner realms. And my personal theory is that the imagination is actually a dimension where I think Plato was suggesting it as if it's the realm of forms. What imagination's substance is not just neural activity, do you know? Imagination is not made of neural synapses. What in neural synapses are how the information is received. And what it is that the question, I would say, is like this, where we were wondering about where consciousness is. We're like, it's in the brain, you know? And when we came to look at the brain, Or if you were to wonder about where the brain is, it's like the most beautiful paradox in reality. How the invisible and visible are simultaneous. Duality's great lesson for the sentient being is, in some sense, can you acknowledge two worlds in one? This is when any being who understands this and realizes that oneness is unknown but the duality is known, then it's as if you're done with this plane of existence. You can stick around if you want. It's another way of saying free yourself from yourself that was creating the inner world of yourself, and once the inner realms stop for just an instant, a simplicity to the outer realms is witnessed, where it's as if the person who's been thinking they've been suffering their whole life suddenly reaches a point where they're like, who has been suffering? What has been suffering? One of the most profound mystical quotes I've ever heard is from a man called Serene Maharaj, and it's a question. Such a simple, genius question. Serene Maharaj, this liberated being, he says, are you an entity? Question mark. Just take that question in. Are you an individual boundary of intelligence, or is the intelligence boundless and the boundary a strange choice? You see, it's as if the person realizes that their life is interconnected with the realm of manifestation. You know, to be an advanced communicator and build an advanced civilization is another way of saying, how do we find the most honorable way? And natural intelligence can surpass its unnatural. It's as if like the honesty of the brain is the opening of the heart. Guys, I think this noise cancellation is working because the amount of wind that's just like hitting me right now, it's like I'm just holding my laptop on the table. But anyways, where I'm going with this is that we have allowed human history be just driven, or for some time, I'm not talking about ancient times, but when I look at the modern human being, it's as if the intellect has more of a purpose of activity than in some sense a consideration of why is the intellect there. But when somebody asks this question, it's another way of saying, why is existence survival? And you see the door of mysticism this opens. It's as if, you know, sometimes philosophy questions, and from a philosophical perspective, their purpose is not to find an answer. Their purpose is to, in some sense, discover questions. What other questions could be there, you see? To me, it's as if the religious, I'll make a comment about religion here, where to me the religious psychology is trying to liberate itself from the chaos of duality, or I would say the conditions of duality, through a sort of acceptance of a singularity. It's as if when a person suddenly realizes, let's say from a religious context, you're like, oh my God, God is moving everybody. right? So it's as if your responsibility for who, like the individual is there. It's as if it goes, it's another way of saying you turned the world into a oneness that didn't need to be human, right? I think people don't realize religion is not for a human being. It is for the human spirit. You know, in religious books, at least some of them, in the beginning it says this is a book for the unseen, for those who have faith in the unseen. That means if the world can't be bigger than your eyes, then you are, you have accepted the box of your perception too soon. The world has so many mysteries, and these great mysteries stare at us. And the honorable attempt of the human mind is to challenge it, to meet the challenge. To me, I feel every lifetime, it doesn't matter who you are, what sort of karmic speed or a smoothness or turbulence you've experienced, at some point in the conscious living event of a sentient being, consciousness wonders about the totality of its ability. That means if we were to consider human ability being just for a being in a singular dimension, it's as if like, yeah, we're just physical creatures, at best we make noises. Anyways, to move my own attention to more the focus of this topic. In the subtitle, I don't know if I corrected it, Serene smiles of the liberated intellect, not the realized, I mean it's the same, but like liberated. What that means is, could it be that the intellectual entity, an entity that is actually being a mathematician, to me, in the intellect is all about sequence. Logic is all about sequence. To reason what happens in this world, it's like, how do we, it's as if imagine like movement of the world is like a wild buffalo, and the basic arithmetic is like a way where we have saddled this wilderness, right? And so we have not only projected time, which is it's like people don't know, I don't know, I think instinctually people know, and intuitively they know, but it's as if before we can even read, before we can accept that there are letters in the alphabet, a mathematical language was necessary. So what I'm trying to tell you, all reality comes down to basic mathematics, you know? Now, why I'm saying this is because we had to be able to tell apart two words, and we had to be capable of saying, okay, this word comes first, this word comes first, and even before that, this letter comes first, then this letter. You see? Guys, it's so windy on my balcony. I literally feel like one of those captains, you know, on a ship in the middle of the ocean that's like standing on the sail or something. My realization was that my intellectual reasoning for my own suffering was denying me to consider that on an emotional levels, the only approach to human life is freedom. You know, it's as if imagine a humanity, this would be truly an example of an advanced humanity, where honesty, trust, and kindness had become second nature. Imagine there's some beings who are trying to get to paradise, and there's some beings who are already there. They never left poetically. The original nature of how truth is being fragmented to itself is, on some level, It's like what is in control of the world. It's not just the temporary brain that is simulating a sort of archetypal, let's say, inner realm psychological relationship with the world. What is moving here, dear listeners? Just to not, let's say, frighten, the reactive imagination. It's an unknown living event. And this unknown living event has an emotional dimension, just like mathematical languages, like you suddenly, when you look at reality, mathematics makes sense. You're seeing, in some sense, this separation of manifestation, its comings and goings, its divisions and its infinitude. So it's like there's a mathematical language. Let's say there's just, the language each nation has. And then there's an emotional language, which is very difficult, I think, for the intellect to acknowledge, because the intellect moves with certainty, but emotions are based on the instantaneity of the trust of the free will. So I'm saying, let's take an angry person, for example. Let's say somebody's angry at the wrong person. Okay, and they don't know it's the wrong person. People are like, hey man, this guy didn't do it. Why are you angry? Imagine a musician's like on stage and somebody throws something and the musician's like, who did it? And it's like the wrong guy. And the musician's like, yeah, everybody boo this guy or something like that. Everybody go buy tomatoes and throw at this guy. Can you imagine, somebody who was tomato salesman and he'd go say the most bizarre things so people would throw tomatoes at him? That's like a medieval marketing. But what I'm trying to say is that my decency, which somehow through my own rationalization I'd come to a sort of acceptance. There's some moments in life where you're automatically humbled by the nature of the moment, right? There's moments, I would say, where it's like a sort of peak and trough of the soul during the lifetime, right? Or I would say, ultimately, our eyes are moving. And this movement is trying to be contained through languages. So we can say on some mystical level, I'll take it to ancient mysticism here. The Upanishad said the seer of the seen is unseen, right? And in so many different yogis have said that it's like at some point, you transcend the visible games, then you transcend the invisible games, and then eventually you come to the inconceivable moment. Right. I guess this whole episode, I'm just trying to tell the species, appreciate the sophistication of the intellect and what kind of an advanced technology, our brain's behavior is. But at the same time, the consideration of when I say people like the species and acknowledging that on an emotional level, it's as if like if I'm saying an advanced civilization is the advancement of civilization. Civilization means everything that's happening by a conscious human being, on this planet. So it would be as if I'm saying, what would the destiny of all the emotional states presented on Earth, as if the surface of the Earth is a stage and human beings open their eyes, and it's like their inspiration of their activity is not just based on their intellect, but the ultimate choice is being on, in some sense, what sort of emotion a sort of pure attention wants to experience existence through, right? There is, on one level, we say, okay, there's because we're a biological entity, it's like, there's a desire towards a physical. It's like we need certain objects to exist, and hilariously, we need certain subjects to exist consciously as an object. And then at the same time, the objects and subjects, their interaction leads to a sort of emotion. And this, my personal opinion is, emotions arise when additional spontaneous dimensions can be added to a moment. Pretty much it's an additional dimension. So let's say somebody, like, okay, let's say they tell somebody, certain psychotherapy, I know there some traditions do this. I don't know if it started from Freud, but it's like, I think it started with Freud. But pretty much there's this approach where, like, they tell this person, remember a moment that you were sad. Okay, something like that. So the person remembers, like, oh man, yesterday I was sad. But then it's like the psychotherapist keeps telling this person, okay, remember another moment you were sad. And eventually, so many layers of imagery are found in the conscious moment that the person suddenly becomes emotional. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm saying it's like emotions are actually kind of like the wilderness of our imagination. It's like they arise from a wild imagination, a mind that can hold many simulations of reality simultaneously, to be able to even compare them to have an emotion. Ultimately, like, what can I say? Like, I just realized that after we have physiologically survived, we're like, what next? And then we're like, okay, psychological survival. After we have psychologically survived, what next? Okay, we say, all right, let's say there's emotional survival. And after we have emotionally survived, after we have reached the point where, just like mythologically the planets would align, let's say the physiology, psychology, and the emotions all align. To me, it seems that there is a chance that the world is designed to make survival a distraction to the whole setting. I'm gonna play like one of my favorite songs ever right now. Our intellect exists because of fear. And our life beyond the intellect, or how sometimes, it's not like the person has emotions, it's like emotions visit the person. It's like a person, it's fascinating. It's like the world is moving through us through our own choice. It's like, what happens when there's a giant world and a small self in it? the self just like it's like, all right, time to figure out this giant world. I don't know. I just in my inner realms, an advanced human being, excuse me, an advanced humanity is in the reach of 2022. It's like from the distance, in the distance of the oceans of time, I see, a great ship, somebody's gonna in history be the first captain of a sky sea. And imagine it's a girl named Stella. It's hilarious. Probabilities that are actualized become prophecies. So in the chat section, there's a question. Somebody says, is it possible we're in another reality, some transition? I mean, the possibility is there in our inner realms. Like I am envisioning the possibility of myself flying, right? But the only flying I'm doing is I'm flying in outer space. That means technically right now I'm flying because the planet's flying in outer space. But is it possible we're in another reality? That's the whole point of mysticism. That's deep, like mysticism. For me, in my school of thought, I'm like, okay, after, just like how, like, I don't know if people tried this when they were kids, but like, I remember I have a twin brother and he had the swimming pool and we would, in some sense, challenge each other who could swim to the bottom of the, what do you call it, the bottom of the swimming pool and touch the bottom and come back. And to me, it's like mysticism is like that. All those people who go into states of samadhi, it's as if the person realizes that the duality they've been, the life they're trying to escape from or transcend beyond is actually the original divinity, right? That means there's going to be a, probably like a, certain school or a certain group of people in the future where they're going to be pretty much divine atheists. And so their view is that materialism is the most divine thing. I'm telling you, it's probably going to happen. Some atheist is going to be like, what if all of this is divinity? But it doesn't have to be a storified divinity. I think this was where Spinoza said culture was very ahead and stuff. To me, on some level, I'll say what I feel God is why there should be anything happening at all here. The Yoga Patanjali Sutras say this world, the samsara, is like the shadow of the real world. Like we're in the shadow world of truth, and we're like, it's more than our senses. we come to our senses to realize there's more than our senses. It is important not to be just a human being that can acknowledge, let's say, the emotions of found in the individual conscious sector of perception. Perception is honestly like a global unifying factor. We all stop freaking out about truth because we're realizing it's perception. The great perception, which was the counter culture of the great deception, which was in some sense we accepted our limitations before realizing how limitless this world is. Nobody can be a passing thought. When a person realizes this, thoughts don't bother them. Just like a bird flies in the sky or clouds come and go, it's like thoughts. They just come and go. What is actually here though? Our own suffering makes us forget others are emotional entities because we feel our attention and like it's zoomed in on our emotion. We have to have a capability just like an eagle that flies off from a branch and goes into the sky and sees the whole forest at once. The species requires a sort of eagle vision for any human being anywhere on the planet to have an ability to shift to a macro context and usually humanize, like fear. The fear of death goes away when you realize how giant the system is. It's as if like it's too big to know what we're even fearing. It's too unknown. So that's it. Pretty much, there's a joy that can be found. Just like how in these talks, I guess, let's say, if I was speaking to the intellectual dimension of the, let's say, for the species. It's as if I've been telling people that every person has their own inner realm. What that means is like when two people communicate, let's say person A and person B, person A is starting in their own reality and person B is starting in their own reality, right? And if we judge a person by just the limited information we see, it's as if we ignore that they have a world behind their eyes. Every person is there. Like violent people, they're oblivious to the inner realms of others, right? Kind people, they are super conscious to the inner realms of others. Even like, let's say anybody who's a parent, it's like the parent doesn't just care for the physicality of their child, right? They also realize that behind the eyes of the body, it's like there's a life force moving, right? Before we name it, And perhaps when the intellect becomes liberated, it's another way of saying we stop fearing mathematics. We stop fearing time. The human being just realizes it's like the emotional experience of life is not necessarily ideological. It can be inspired, but sometimes it's like we're not just being a person, we're being a moment in this universe. Like that's, there could be influences beyond you know, the beliefs of language. It's like, I remember when I read this quote from Ludwig Wittgenstein when he said, the limits of my language are the limits of my world. I was like, no way. I've been identifying with the name this whole time. It's like, who knew how deep the eyes are? You know, how much deeper than what we see? You know, we're like 8 billion living mysteries inside a giant living mystery. You know? So as a, let's say, playful exercise, you know, I would say to the viewers, whoever you are, one day, live just for one day, try this out, where any situation that happens, where there's other conscious entities involved, let's say even animals as well, right, lesser species, like pets or whatever. But the whole idea is, the person doesn't just acknowledge the unknown potential of the mind of the other, but considers the unknown potential of their heart, which is how their free will experiences life for the first time in that moment, and then there's a response, right? Pretty much I'm saying that the intellect can make us forget that it was the emotions of our ancestors that fueled true survival and evolution. It wasn't just the ideas, you know. And so this is something very profound for me, because I am... Okay guys, my helicopter's here, I'm gonna go. It's like, wait, it's like you forgot to pick me up. I gotta talk to that, you know, helicopter pilot later. I don't know, there's noise suppression, so maybe people didn't hear the helicopter noise. But anyways, where I was going with... my intellect, which has been trying to solve this, let's say, problem, or I shouldn't say problem, but this challenge of a lifetime of how an advanced civilization will emerge. I realized that I did not have faith in the emotional dimension of the species. And that's what was restored within me today, which inspired this episode. That means it's as if, like, it's not just on an intellectual potential of like a creature, but the emotional potential. How we're not in this world just to see geometry move. There's a life to the world beyond our personality, and those who experience it, they already know their own blessing. That means it's like the greatest blessing is it's pretty much freedom. And when a person's wondering, like, who's in charge of my understanding of this universe, they come to their self. So if it's like the moment a person is free from an idea of self, they're also free from anything that came with the idea of self. You know? It's as if the person's like, oh my god, I have been possessed by my own opinions this whole time. You know what I'm saying? I'm saying like that's the beauty of the living unknown. Our minds are not here to just give an answer to a problem. They're here to realize the majesty of the realm, right? That means, imagine, you know, it's like the human, like, let's say back in the day there was the concept of like kings and servants of the realm. It's like the human species will reach a point where it has to honorably enter a potential conscious galactic sphere. That means, who knows, maybe in like 200 years, like, you know, the super chill, like, enlightened extraterrestrials from the Andromeda galaxy, just like, you know, they're like, what's up, humanity? And we're like, what's up, neighbor? Next door galactic neighbor, you know what I mean? Guys, it would be embarrassing if we are the only, like, conscious species in the whole, like, Milky Way galaxy. You know, like, you know, we were the first option of the, you know, let's say next door Andromeda galactic extraterrestrial neighbors, you know what I mean? Like, if advanced aliens land, I'm like, oh, you know, we're the smartest species in the galaxy. think a truly advanced or multidimensional being first acknowledges the potential of its dimensions, just like let's say the cast of a movie, the dude's like stranded on an island, and he tries to use everything he sees, right? The advancement of the human species should be similar. It's like instead of one person cast away on an island, it's like a species stranded on an island in the galaxy, a planet in this galaxy, right? And so the species, an advanced civilization, is our greatest strategy, pretty much, to surpass or to in some sense build an interstellar boat. Which would be like an interstellar city, pretty much. So, whoever you are, for one day try it out and just allow the intellect to be content. And just consider the unknown emotions that are moving, like the sentient human being. Like, it's so fascinating. It's not all just, I mean, this is something, of course, I've had the acknowledgement, but I've never appreciated it. It's really upsetting to me. Bob Dylan has this quote where he says, "A hero is someone who understands the responsibility that comes with his freedom." And so it's like we've reached a point in history where the species needs to be heroic. And the most heroic thing the species can do is to acknowledge all its dimensions, all the different languages that we call the pretty much it's like a visible intelligence which has limitations, and then an invisible intelligence which is based on invisible limitations, and have it's like pretty much the body is like a paintbrush, where poetically, just like in economics, we have the idea of an invisible hand, where it's as if consciousness is the invisible hand that is moving the paintbrush of the body, and sensory perception is how this paintbrush is dipped in paint, and our expression of our free will is like how this is being painted on the empty canvas, which is the context of it. And so there's moments, I guess, where we have to see beyond our suffering, see beyond our own, imagination's grasp of how the future should be. It's as if what I've learned today is really when a human being can trust the emotional, we call it the emotional sector of life. It's like when we can have faith that our species will have the proper, every human being on the planet will have the proper emotions to, in some sense, present the proper thoughts, which in some sense become the proper actions. And then the proper actions, they lead to the proper results, right? It's as if when I look at an advanced civilization, there's a geometry issue. There's the structure, like blueprint or the basic ethos. And then it's pretty much the strategy and the tactic. Right, the strategy of the species is the story it tells itself. Its tactic is what it does based on the story it says to itself. Pretty pretty much how it manifests this strategy. So pretty much strategy is like an inner realm, probability and tactics are pretty much how you externalize it. Because something is moving here, guys, and it's more than an object, because why would the object notice it? Like, we're limited by an objective perception, but it's like the body is an antenna, and the brain is an antenna, and the mind is a signal, and the signal can be independent to the antenna. And if we become conscious through the antenna of the signal, the consciousness of the signal, it's pretty much, the clarification of René Descartes' mind-body dualism. And so, as humanity advances, Serene smiles of liberated intellect, or pretty much a species better smile, it's like pretty much it's I would say, if life, if they, like, there's an ancient saying, I remember this where it said, like, pretty much there's two things you can do in life. You can either trust it or distrust it. And this idea that we only trust things that we see, it's as if, like, that was not what, it's like the reason we survived was actually because our ancestors were not rational entities. Can you imagine, like, the early primitive human being, right? And imagine a saber-toothed tiger growls, and the rational human being is like, no, I need to test and see if this sound is coming from something real. It's like, no, it's the rationality didn't have time. And now, because we have time, our rationality is active. And what rationality is how a subjective probability of reality is attempting to make our subjective self feel more certain about an unknown outcomes. In reality, the world is kind of doing its own thing, and the human being, human consciousness is kind of like doing its own thing. But there's moments where, when the human consciousness stops doing its own thing, it realizes how the world is doing its thing. That's pretty much, the shamanic vision of them, where you're no longer in a soulless or lifeless cosmos. It's like the life belongs to the universal cycle. It doesn't matter if it arises through the human eyes or not. And the future deserves better because we do. And so did our ancestors. So did our ancestors. I think a human being that has the ability to not take, like, here's the thing, imagine you started from taking every dimension seriously, super seriously, super strict, kind of concentration, sort of, the sort of kind of authoritarian perfection, It's as if, imagine you have lived in a world where you have been super serious about all the dimensions of life, and so you're like, okay, let me ease myself, relax myself out of my own conception to see what the nature is, alright? It's as if, if the consciousness is like a moment where there's an opportunity for something to be there, it's either intellectual imagery or, I would say, emotional awareness. It's like, what I'm trying to say is, if the brain, let's say, is like a machine that can be programmed, it's being programmed by visual perception, by the senses, and it's being programmed by its memory, the innate design, also being programmed by culture and all the things external to the thing, to the individual. And it's also being programmed by the unknown ability of, I would say, it's like an unknown intelligence inside an emotional, for the sake of speech, like inside an emotional Iron Man suit. And then that emotional Iron Man suit, inside it, or let me say it this way, imagine there's a physical Iron Man suit, an objective Iron Man suit, and then that objective Iron Man suit is inside a subjective Iron Man suit. Now that subjective Iron Man suit, which the objective Iron Man suit is inside an emotional Iron Man suit. And that emotional Iron Man suit is inside an unknown. Right, so what I'm trying to tell you is it's like the attention piloted beyond the object. It piloted beyond the subject, and through the acceptance of the object and subject, it managed to notice the emotion. And then, in the acceptance of the emotion, the attention pilots to a domain where there isn't movement defining it. Human intelligence is primarily intelligence identifying with movement. So it's pretty much like, it's like a space being realized. It's like a being in space realizes it's being space. But anyways, thanks for listening, guys. Appreciate all the kindness and efforts. Something I guess I should talk about is I've decided to start a sort of blog, but this blog is going to exist inside the membership area. And then I thought, okay, because I write a lot of stuff before typing. Like, to me, it's like I have a notebook everywhere now. Like, I think I own than I own furniture. Not furniture, but just objects in my home. I'll end off with this final comment. The survival of the greatest is a post-truth mentality. And so all can be said, it's like, I would say I would leave it as the time has come to have faith in how emotions will, direct human destiny, the emotions of human beings. If the world is an efficient place, then planet human beings are. It's as if we're emotions. The world, it's an inefficient place. The suffering and the fear is occupying us for how the mind can see the opposite of those archetypal positions. It's like the mind. Like the body is here to experience a known world, the mind is here to notice the relationship, to notice the activity around it. It's like the human lifetime. Like if you look at like birds and squirrels, yeah, it's like let them fly, in their forests or in their forests. But when you look at the human being, the point of the human life is the additional dimension of consciousness we have that other species don't. And this additional dimension exists, I find the reason we have minds is to notice the universal intelligence. it's like the person thought they were like the smartest being, and they're like, wait a minute, what if there's a universal being that's the smartest one? It's like, what if the universe is like, you know, it's been here all the time, and you know, civilizations rise and fall in the universe are like, did they see me? So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. Rise, mankind, rise. That was it.